Excuse me. It happens sometimes, but the first two readings did not actually match what the readings are. I'm just going to do the 1 Peter 1. Like newborn babies, crave pure milk, spiritual milk, so that by it you might grow up into your salvation, now that you have tasted and seen that the Lord is good. As you come to him, the living stone, the one rejected by humans and chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built up into a kind of spiritual house, so that you will be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Christ. For in Scripture it says, "See, I lay a stone in Zion, a chosen and precious cornerstone. The one who trusts in him will never be put to shame." Now to you who believe, this stone is precious, but to those who do not believe, the stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone, and a stone that causes people to stumble, a rock that makes them fall over. They stumble because they disobey the message, which is also what they were destined for. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, so that you might declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into a wonderful light. For once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not heard of mercy, but now you have received mercy. And this is the word of the Lord. So thanks be to God. Many scholars believe that 1 Peter was written just right after the fall of the temple. The second temple had been the center of all worship for the Jewish people and the Hebrews since at least the time of the prophets, and before that temple, there was another one in the same space. Before that, the temple was a movable tent called the tabernacle in the desert with Moses. This is the place that the people thought of as the house of Shekinah, the glory of God. And they believed that this Shekinah glory resided in this temple so that it was set apart and away from the rest of the people. God's priests were called holy as well, which means alien or otherworldly, because they too were set apart for service there. But in 70 AD, the soon-to-be Emperor Titus decided that he was going to besiege. He besieged and he conquered the city of Jerusalem. The Zealots, one of the 4 different kinds of Jewish sects at the time, were an interesting group. And these were the group to which Peter, the apostle, previously belonged before he met Jesus. Eventually, infighting led to all kinds of gap in leadership, but the Zealots were a kind of militant resistance movement. Titus took advantage of some of their flaws. First, he allowed security to be very lax coming up to the Passover season. Then, with the city completely packed to the gills, he sent 4 legions of soldiers to stop the pilgrims from leaving the city after Passover had ended. And this caused massive shortages in water and food and other supplies. He then surrounded all of the Hebrews. He smashed the 3rd wall to the fortress with a battering ram. He attacked the fortress Antonia just to the north of the Temple Mount. Fighting ensued as the Roman military filled the streets everywhere in Jerusalem. And at this point, most of the Jewish zealots decided to flee, so they fled to the temple in retreat. While Titus originally wished to convert the Jewish temple into a pagan site, a Roman soldier went on his way and set the place ablaze instead. The fire spread uncontrollably to the residential areas of the cities. Jews and Jewish Christians fled through underground tunnels we discovered much recently. The zealots in the temple did not escape, and they were all burned to death. Had he not met Jesus, Peter probably would have been among them. Eventually, Titus flattened the Jewish place of worship almost completely. As he said, not one stone left upon another stone. As far as Jerusalem was concerned, there were no more chosen people left. No more temple of the Jews. No more priests or high priests. No more Jewish law. No one set apart to lead worship, and no one to offer sacrifices. The date was September the 7th, 70 AD. The Christians fled, and they scattered throughout the known world as far as Spain. And because of that, Christianity spread. It was the persecution that made us big. To this group of people, Peter writes, "As you come to him, the living stone, the chief cornerstone, the point of the temple, the basis of it all. As you come to the living stone, the one who is rejected by humans, but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, should know that you are being built into a spiritual house. You, the stones, become the temple. A spiritual house because you are a holy priesthood. You are the people set aside. And offering spiritual sacrifices, not lambs, but acts that you do. And these are found acceptable to God the Father through Christ the Son." Again, Paul writes, "As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans, but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built up into a spiritual house and to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to the Father through Christ the Son." And then he writes, "But you are a chosen people. You are a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation. You are God's special possession." It's not the temple, it's you. In short, Peter is saying, the building is gone. We can't go back to church ever again. The building, no matter how important, was made of stones. But you, he says, you are the living stones. You are the temple made mobile, made alive. We're chosen to be living stones, to build something bigger than just a bunch of bricks stacked upon each other, a bunch of brick walls and a building. In 1710, there's a famous architect, Christopher Wren. He designed St. Paul's Cathedral in London. It's probably one of the most beautiful buildings on earth. And he wrote about the construction and the reactions of the workers. Remember, it's 1710. Most of the workers were interviewed, and he recorded the responses. So we went to one and asked, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "I'm laying bricks." He went to another, and the man said, "I'm transporting the stones." But when Wren recalled one worker who was mixing mortar with his arm, who seemed especially cheerful and happy about his work, he noticed something. When he asked this man what he was doing, he didn't say stirring mortar. He said, "I am building a magnificent cathedral." To this man, it wasn't just Christopher Wren building the cathedral. It was everybody involved and every stone that was carried. Sometimes when we think of the church, we think way too small, about our own little piece, and that's it. I tend to focus on a lot of little details because of my job. But maybe I need more big picture. The truth be told, it's all the little things that we do that really build the church, the temple out. It's the smile from the people who are working as volunteers in the kitchen this morning or making coffee. Or maybe that's even more important than what I say or how good a job our music director does. When Peter writes to the people, he writes to tell them that they are the church together. That's it, not a bunch of mortar and stone, but a living, breathing thing, an entity, us. And that's when you know you're doing it right, because it grows, and bricks and mortar don't. And though the people had no official priests anymore, Peter writes to tell them that they don't need somebody else to take their sacrifices. Instead, he says, you are the temple, you are the priests. In fact, more than that, he says you're the royal priesthood, the highest of heights. And you're offering spiritual sacrifices, and they're acceptable to God because of Christ. Because of him, We don't need the temple. We are the temple. From now on, he says, we are the alien, the one who is holy, the one that is set apart. We together become the holy nation, not because our forefathers grew up in a particular land, but because of what God does for us. I'm not a huge baseball fan, but in 1964, Philadelphia Phillies were on the verge of collapse, but then they had a great season. They had a good season, then a great season, then a terrible one. And they let a huge division lead sweep them away. Despite the collapse, the Phillies' season had its share of very beautiful moments. And one of those came about after the ninth inning home run and the All-Star game. The most remarkable thing about this season occurred after this one game. Clay Dalrymple, a Philadelphia Phillies pitcher, was asked if he would assist a young blind girl who had asked through Make-A-Wish for a chance to walk around the field and run the bases. Dalrymple took the little girl over to home plate after the game had ended, where she slowly reached down and felt every corner of the plate and smacked it on the top to knock the dust off. Then slowly the little girl was walked over to first base, where again she stooped down, smiled, and examined every inch of it, and then to second base, and then to third, before rounding home plate once again, with a nice long pause at each one so the girl could confirm her dream. The thing is, while Dalrymple was showing the girl around the bases, he missed something pretty important. See, he'd been so focused on fulfilling the little girl's make-a-wish, he hadn't noticed that the fans stopped leaving. They stopped talking. In fact, people just sort of sat there in silence in the stadium and watched him and his little companion round the bases. Dalrymple had been so focused on the one person that he hadn't been paying attention to all that was going on around him. The kindly baseball player just assumed that the stands were silent because the fans went home. But when he and his new friend finally reached home plate, and this young blind girl had finally run her bases, the ballpark erupted in applause. Dalrymple, however, was shocked by the thunderous clapping, and when he looked up, he saw tens of thousands of fans standing and smiling and cheering in appreciation with pride in their eyes. Later, Dalrymple told Sports Illustrated it was the biggest, most important day ever, and the biggest ovation. And sometimes we forget that as Christians, our efforts to be Christ-like, to be living stones, to be set apart, are observed by other people who are watching. Even though we may be unaware, they're watching. And I have a little theory about this I'd like to share with you. I believe that it's not usually the big things that we do that matters the most. Usually it's just the right things that we do that matter most. I did a little bit of research on this. Top sports teams, top viewership. What do people on this earth pay attention to the most? And what have they been watching for the last 12 months? Now, due to my research, I have to say that hockey did not make the list of the most popular. Hockey has about 250 million viewers over the last 12 months. NASCAR has a little over 300 million. Neither made the list. 300 million's too small. What are people paying attention to? Where's their energy drawn? Rugby. 470 million people watched rugby this year. 500 million people watched American football. 550 million watched baseball. 800 million watched American basketball. 850 million watched tennis. And 900 million people watched volleyball. Field hockey got 2 billion. Cricket, 2.5 billion. And 3.5 billion people witnessed a soccer game in the last 12 months. It appears that these are some of the most attention-grabbing moments in the history of the world, and they've happened within the last 12 months. 3.5 billion people interested in watching. It must be important. But who was the MVP of the last Super Bowl? Do you remember? It was Ken Walker, actually. MVP, NBA Finals. Who won? Oklahoma City Thunder, Shia Gilgeous-Anderson. Who won the World Series last year? Anybody remember that one? Dodgers, somebody. Yeah. What about the World Cup MVP? Do you know his name? How about this one? Because I think maybe it's even more important, but nobody really watched it. Who won the Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine last year, and for what? It's for CRISPR, for gene editing, trying to edit Alzheimer's out of people's DNA. Who received the top researcher's prize for physics? What's it in? It's for breakthroughs in quantum computing that seem to suggest that the computer is working in more than just our own dimension, but is calculating in more than 7 different realities at once. Who won the Pulitzer Prize for journalism investigations? Who won the Field Medal for math? Doesn't sound fun, but the math that won the Field Medal is going to be used to solve world hunger. How many people watched? Who are the people that shaped your life personally? The football player on the field? Can't remember the name of the MVP? Well, who taught you something fundamental? Who taught you how to read, count to 10, do math? Who taught you one important lesson as a teen about how to respect someone else? Who taught you how to behave at the dinner table? I bet you can tell me that name, can't you? Who showed up for you? Consistency. Who made all the difference in your life? Who dropped you off places, picked you up places, took you to the hospital? Who cared about you in ways that are very specific to you and made you a better you? Who shared with you with tears, hugged with you, lived with you in pain, walked with you through a death, sat with you at a wedding, picked up a child at the birth of a grandkid, shared a name? I bet you know every single one of those names, don't you? 3.5 billion people weren't watching that, were they? People aren't shaped most by those who are important to the world, but by those who are important to us. The biggest influences on your life usually come from people who will never be famous except in your life and your mind. History remembers great figures, prize winners, the champions, the innovators, but a person's life is usually shaped far more by the quiet, constant actions of ordinary people. Someone who taught them, supported them, listened to them, showed up for them when it mattered. I bet those names and faces come to mind immediately. You may even feel a bit of gratitude swelling up right now. Those people you're thinking about, that you're picturing, that you're remembering, those are the living stones God has placed in your life, ordinary people walking through life with you and working out the temple and what it's like. Their small, faithful, fruitful acts, shared meals, burdens carried, truth spoken in love, quiet prayers they offered for you, they are the spiritual sacrifices that strengthen the church far more than any spotlight moment or important book or game could. I believe that it's not usually the big things we do that matter the most. Usually it's the right things we do that matter most. Giving a lamb to a priest at the temple 3 times a year was important to the people at that time. But spiritual sacrifices, those little things that we do for our Christ and for our neighbor, they change us and they change the world around us. Spiritual sacrifices build an even bigger temple with more living stones and more living stones each year. They build the kingdom. The problem is we don't always like to live like a royal priesthood or a holy nation, at least not as we're called to be. Particularly, Peter's original audience was afraid of this. They too wanted to cling to an old past, old ways of doing things, instead of celebrating what God was doing new. There's an old story. An old beggar lived near the king's palace, and one day he saw a proclamation posted outside the palace gates. The king was throwing a great dinner, and everybody who had royal garments got to come to the party. A beggar went on his way. He looked at the rags that he was wearing, and he sighed. Surely the king and their families wore royal robes, he thought, but I have none. Slowly, though, an idea came to mind. The audacity made him tremble. Would he dare? He made his way back to the palace. He approached the guard at the gate and said, "Please, sir, I would like to speak to the king." "Wait here," the guard replied, and a few minutes later he was back. "His Majesty will see you. Let the beggar in," he shouted. "You wish to see me," says the king. "Yes, your Majesty. I want so much to attend your banquet. I want to honor you at dinner, but I have no royal robes to wear. So please, sir, may I be so bold as to borrow one of your oldest garments so that I might attend the banquet." And the beggar shook so hard he could barely see the smirk and smile on the king's face. "You're actually very wise for coming to me," says the king, and he called the prince, his young son. "Take this man to your room, have him bathed and cleaned, and dress him in your brand new clothes." The prince did as he was told, and soon the beggar was standing before the mirror, clothed in garments that he had never even dared to hope for before. "And now you're eligible to attend the banquet tomorrow night," said the prince. "But even more important, you'll never ever need to buy new clothes again. These will never tear, and they'll last the rest of your life." The beggar dropped to his knees. "Oh, thank you," he cried in the moment. But as he began to leave, he looked back at that pile of dirty rags on the floor and he hesitated. What if the prince was wrong? What if the king changes his mind? What if he needs those old clothes again? And quickly, as the prince looked the other way, the beggar sneaked over into the corner, grabbed his old clothes, wadded them up, and shoved them under his shirt before leaving. The banquet was far greater than the beggar had ever imagined, but he could not enjoy himself. He'd made a small bundle out of the old rags and kept it on his lap under his shirt, but he had to hold it in place. The food was passed by so quickly, and the beggar missed some of the best delicacies while trying to hold his rags with one hand. Time proved the prince was right. The clothes did last forever. Still, the poor beggar grew fonder and fonder of the old rags. As time passed, people forgot about the royal robes, and they began to just refer to the man as the old man with the dirty rags. One day, as the old beggar lay dying, the king came to visit. The beggar saw the sad look on the king's face as the king looked over at the small bundle of rags next to the bed. And suddenly the beggar remembered the prince's words, and he realized that this bundle of rags had cost him a lifetime of celebrations. And so the king and the beggar just cried together. Our king cannot stand to see us holding on to old rags. For as Peter puts it, we are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, set apart, a holy nation, and we are God's very special possession. No matter where, when, or how you were born, all God's children in Christ are the chosen, and all who do right make up the holy nation. If you follow the way, the truth, and the life, what might you accomplish tomorrow and us together? What temple will we build? All who strive to sacrifice for others, you are the living embodiment of the temple made alive. We are the living stones, and the living stones work by every day acting with small bits of kindness, the kind that matter most, and the kind that actually get your name remembered. Amen. If you would please